The
Hello
air in the
everyone,
garden of the
and
Quartermaine
welcome to
mansion
my
was thick
General
with the scent of
Hospital
roses
official
and
channel. I
unspoken
hope everyone
anxieties.
is having a wonderful day.
It was a picture
Before
of
we
opulent
begin,
perfection,
please
a
hit the
tableau of
subscribe
wealth
button
and
and give
happiness
this video a
meticulously
thumbs up.
constructed for the union of Willow Tate and Drew Kane. Every white folding chair was aligned with military precision, every blossom in the cascading floral arrangements seemed to have been personally approved by the ghost of Emily Quartermaine. The guests, a who's who of Port Charles society, murmured in polite, low tones, their finery a ripple of silk and linen under the gentle late-afternoon sun. At the heart of this beautiful scene stood Willow, a vision in ivory silk, her hand resting lightly on Drew's arm. She looked ethereal, peaceful, a woman who had weathered countless storms and had finally, miraculously, found her safe harbor. Drew, for his part, looked every inch the heroic groom, his posture straight, his smile genuine if a little tight around the eyes. He had fought for this, for her, for the chance to build a stable, loving family with Willow and their son, Wiley. He had navigated the minefield of her past, the specter of her illness, and the ever-present, complicated shadow of Michael Corinthos. Today was to be the culmination of that fight. Today was for the future. Michael Corinthos sat in the front row, his son Wiley fidgeting excitedly beside him. He had given Willow his blessing, had told her he wanted her happiness above all else. He meant it. Or, at least, he had convinced himself he did. But as he watched her gaze up at Drew, a serene smile on her lips, a cold knot tightened in his stomach. This was wrong. Not just emotionally, not just because a part of him would always love her, but fundamentally, morally, legally wrong. The secret he carried was no longer a mere piece of damaging information, it had become a live grenade, and his finger was slipping off the pin. He had promised harmony, a deathbed promise extracted from a woman whose entire life was a lie, that he would never tell. But watching Willow, so innocent, so trusting, about to pledge her life to a man based on a foundation of catastrophic falsehoods, the promise felt less like a sacred vow and more like a sentence. The officiant, a benign-faced man with a soothing voice, cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The words washed over Michael, becoming a distant hum. He saw Nina Reeves, sitting a few rows back, her expression a complex mix of happiness for Drew and a lingering sadness for herself. He saw his mother, Carly, her jaw set in a way that suggested she was performing the Herculean task of holding her tongue. He saw Jocelyn, his sister, shooting him worried glances. They all knew he was struggling, but they attributed it to lost love, not to world-shattering knowledge. The ceremony proceeded, a well-choreographed dance of vows and rings. Willow's voice was clear and steady as she spoke her lines, her eyes locked on Drew's. Drew's responses were equally firm, filled with a palpable sense of devotion. They were in their own bubble, a fortress of newfound love that seemed impervious to the outside world. If anyone present can show just cause why this man and this woman may not be lawfully joined together, the officiant intoned, the traditional, often ignored line hanging in the air, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace. A collective, almost imperceptible, sigh of relief passed through the crowd. This was the moment. The dangerous moment in every wedding where fiction sometimes bled into reality. In this case, it was a mere formality. The pause was brief, a beat of silence meant to be filled by the next line of the ceremony. It was in that breath, that sliver of silence, that Michael Corinthos stood up. The sound of his chair scraping against the flagstone path was like a gunshot in the tranquil garden. 200 heads swiveled in his direction. A wave of confused murmurs rippled through the guests. Carly's eyes widened in alarm. Jocelyn gripped the edge of her seat. At the altar, Willow and Drew turned, their expressions shifting from serene concentration to bewildered surprise. Michael? Drew said, his voice low, a warning and a question fused into one word. Willow's face was a mask of confusion. Michael, what is it? What's wrong? Michael's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of dread and resolve. He walked forward, his steps slow and deliberate, until he was standing just a few feet from the couple, placing himself between them and the officiant. The perfect tableau was now cracked, the illusion of the day shattered by his mere presence. I can't, he said, his voice rough with emotion. He looked not at Drew, whose posture had become defensive, but at Willow. He looked at her, this woman he had once loved, the mother of his child, and saw the trust in her eyes begin to curdle into fear. You can't what, Michael? Drew asked, stepping slightly in front of Willow, a protective gesture that only fueled Michael's conviction. This isn't the time or the place. There will never be a right time or place for this, Michael replied, his gaze still fixed on Willow. But if I let you do this, if I let you marry him, it would be a lie. The entire marriage would be built on a lie. A gasp went through the crowd. Carly half rose from her seat. Michael, don't, she hissed, but he was beyond listening. What lie? Willow's voice was small, fragile. What are you talking about? Michael took a deep, shuddering breath. The garden was so silent now you could hear the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Every person was leaning forward, hanging on the precipice of his next words. It's about your mother, Willow. It's about Harmony. Willow flinched as if struck. Her relationship with her late mother was a tangled web of abuse, manipulation, and religious fanaticism. The mention of her name was a ghost stepping into the sunlight. What about her? She's gone, Michael. She can't hurt me anymore. That's just it, Michael said, his voice dropping, forcing everyone to strain to hear. She hurt you more than you could ever possibly know. In her final moments, she told me something. She made me promise not to tell you. She said it was to protect you, but it was just another one of her lies, another way to control you from beyond the grave. Drew moved closer to Willow, putting a steadying arm around her waist. Whatever this is, Michael, it can wait. This is Willow's day. Our day. You're upsetting her. You think I'm upsetting her now? Michael's voice rose, sharp with a bitter laugh. You have no idea. If she goes through with this, the upset will be nothing compared to what's coming. Tell me. Willow's voice was stronger now, edged with a desperate command. She pushed gently away from Drew, standing on her own 2 feet, facing Michael. Tell me what she said. Michael looked at her, at the woman standing so bravely in her wedding dress, and he knew he was about to destroy her world. But to let her live in the ruins of a lie was a greater cruelty. Harmony told me, she confessed, that she wasn't your biological mother. A wave of whispers crashed through the garden. Not her mother? Who is she, then? The revelation was shocking, a seismic event in Willow's personal history, but it wasn't, on its own, enough to stop a wedding. Willow herself looked stunned, her hand flying to her throat. What? That can't be. Who was my mother, then? Michael's eyes flickered towards Nina, who was watching the scene with a growing sense of dread, her hand pressed to her mouth. He then looked back at Willow, his expression one of profound, heartbreaking pity. That's not all, Willow. That's not the part that matters right now. He paused, gathering the full, horrific weight of the truth. Harmony also told me who your biological father is. The air left the garden. The silence was absolute, suffocating. This was the heart of it. This was the secret that had the power to unravel everything. Who? Willow whispered, her eyes wide with terror and a dawning, horrifying comprehension. Michael's gaze was unwavering. He looked past her, past Drew, and his eyes locked directly onto a man sitting in the second row, a man who had been watching the proceedings with a mixture of confusion and growing alarm. A man whose entire world was about to be obliterated. Your father, Michael said, his voice ringing with clarity in the hushed space, is Cyrus Renaud. For a moment, there was no reaction. The name didn't immediately compute. Cyrus Renaud? The notorious drug lord? The man who had brought violence and poison to Port Charles? The man who was currently in prison for a litany of crimes? The connection was too absurd, too horrific to process. And then, the world exploded. Willow made a sound, a small, choked whimper, and her legs buckled. Drew caught her before she hit the ground, his own face a mask of shock and disbelief. That's a lie, he roared at Michael, holding a trembling Willow against his chest. That's a vicious, disgusting lie. But Michael didn't back down. He stood his ground, his own pain etched on his face. It's the truth, Drew. Harmony confessed it to me. She was paid to take Willow, to raise her as her own. Cyrus is her biological father. The garden descended into chaos. Guests were on their feet, talking over each other, their voices a cacophony of shock and speculation. Carly had her hand over her heart, her face pale. Jocelyn looked like she was going to be sick. And Nina? Nina was frozen, her body rigid, her mind racing 1,000,000 miles a minute, connecting dots that formed a picture of unimaginable tragedy. But the most profound reaction came from the man Michael had named. Cyrus Renaud, who had been granted a day pass to attend the wedding of his half-sister's fiancé, a tenuous connection he'd used to weasel his way into a moment of normalcy, slowly rose to his feet. A strange, twisted smile played on his lips. It wasn't a smile of joy, but one of triumphant vindication, of monstrous pride. He looked at Willow, crumpled in Drew's arms, and he saw not a daughter, but a possession. A new weapon. A piece of himself he never knew existed. "My child," he said, his voice cutting through the din. The words were not paternal, they were possessive, gothic, and chilling. That single utterance broke the last of Willow's composure. A raw, guttural scream tore from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated agony. This was worse than any diagnosis, any betrayal, any pain she had ever endured. To learn, at the moment of her greatest happiness, that she was the biological offspring of a monster, a man who represented everything she despised, a man of violence, deceit, and evil, was a psychological death sentence. The foundation of her identity, already cracked and fragile, had not just shattered, it had revealed a bottomless abyss beneath. Drew held her tighter, his own worldview fracturing. The woman he loved, the gentle, kind, resilient woman he was about to marry, was the daughter of the man who had tried to destroy his family, who had brought so much suffering to Port Charles. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. He looked from Willow's devastated face to Cyrus's smug one, and a cold fury began to replace his shock. "This changes nothing," he declared, his voice shaking with emotion, trying to reach the woman he loved through the howling storm of this revelation. "Willow, look at me. This doesn't change who you are. You are not him. You are kind, and good, and strong. This changes nothing between us." But he was wrong. It changed everything. Willow was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup, creating dark tracks of despair. "It changes everything," she sobbed, her voice broken. "Don't you see? My blood, his blood, is in me. Everything I am, it's all a lie. My entire life is a lie." She looked at her hands as if they were foreign, contaminated objects. How can anyone, ever look at me the same way again?" The officiant stood awkwardly, his book clutched to his chest, a forgotten player in a drama that had far surpassed his role. The wedding was over. There would be no pronouncement of husband and wife, no kiss, no joyous recessional. There was only the wreckage. Michael watched, his own heart breaking. He had done what he felt he had to do, but the cost was written plainly on Willow's face. He had saved her from a marriage he believed was doomed by the secret, but in doing so, he had plunged her into a deeper, more personal hell. He had traded one kind of pain for another, far more devastating one. Cyrus took a step forward, his guards flanking him closely. "We have much to discuss, Willow," he said, his tone dripping with a faux sincerity that was more threatening than any outright menace. "A father and daughter should get to know one another. Stay away from her." Drew snarled, positioning his body as a shield between Cyrus and Willow. "You are not her father. You are a sperm donor. You mean nothing to her. You will never be a part of her life." "I think that will be for her to decide," Cyrus replied smoothly, his eyes glinting with malicious amusement. "Blood, after all, is thicker than water. And my blood runs in her veins. We are connected now, whether you like it or not." This statement sent a fresh wave of tremors through Willow. The idea of being connected to this man, of being bound to him by the most fundamental biological tie, was a prison sentence. She felt branded, marked by a sin she didn't commit. The carefully constructed order of the event devolved into a scene of surreal bedlam. Laura Collins, the mayor, began quietly but firmly ushering guests away, understanding the profound need for privacy. Carly and Jocelyn rushed to Michael's side, their expressions a turbulent mix of anger, sympathy, and horror. Sonny Corinthos, who had been watching from the back with a stoic expression, now moved forward, his presence a silent promise of containment, his eyes fixed on Cyrus with a lethal promise. Nina Reeves remained seated, as if paralyzed. Her mind was reeling, not just from the shock of Willow's paternity, but from the devastating irony. She had spent years searching for her own lost daughter, and here was another mother, another story of a stolen child and a fractured identity playing out in the most public and cruel way imaginable. Her heart ached for Willow, a girl she had grown to care for deeply, and the pain was a sharp, personal wound. In the center of it all, the wedding altar was no longer a place of promise but a stage for a tragedy. The floral arches seemed to mock the scene with their vibrant, cheerful beauty. The empty chairs were silent witnesses to the destruction of a future. Drew, ignoring everyone else, focused entirely on Willow. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "Willow, listen to me. We will get through this. Together. I love you. That has not changed. It will never change." But Willow was retreating into a place he couldn't reach. The shame and horror of her newfound lineage were a tidal wave, drowning out his words of comfort. She saw the way people were looking at her, not with pity for a jilted bride, but with a new, wary horror. She was no longer just Willow Tate, the kind-hearted teacher, the survivor. She was Willow Tate, daughter of Cyrus Renaud, the monster's progeny. "I can't," she whispered, pulling away from his touch. "I can't do this. I can't be with you. Not now. Not like this." "Willow, no," Drew pleaded, his own composure cracking. "Don't let him win. Don't let this destroy us." "It already has," she said, her voice hollow, empty of everything but despair. "He's destroyed everything, just by existing. And now, I have to exist with this, with him, inside me." She looked down at her wedding dress, the symbol of her joy now feeling like a shroud. "I need to go. I need to be alone." She turned and, without another look at Drew, at Michael, at the ruins of her wedding, she fled. She gathered the skirts of her elaborate gown and ran, a streak of white against the green of the lawn, disappearing into the mansion, leaving a void of silence and sorrow in her wake. Drew made a move to follow her, but Michael placed a hand on his arm. "Give her a minute, Drew. She's in shock." Drew rounded on Michael, all his fury and frustration finding a target. "This is your fault," he shouted, shoving Michael back a step. "You and your self-righteous timing. You couldn't have told her yesterday? Or tomorrow? You had to wait for this moment, to humiliate her in front of everyone, to destroy her. Was this about her, Michael? Or was it about you? Was it because you couldn't stand to see her happy with me?" The accusation hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Had Michael's motives been purely altruistic? Or was there a part of him, a part he might not even admit to himself, that was glad to have stopped the wedding, to have proven that he, Michael, was the one who held the key to her truth, even if that truth was a weapon of mass destruction? "I did it to save her from a life built on a lie," Michael said, his voice tight. "You think a marriage that started with this hanging over it would have survived? It would have poisoned everything. You don't know that." Drew shot back. "We could have handled it together, privately, with love and support. Instead, you dropped a nuclear bomb on her life in the most public way possible. Look what you've done to her." He gestured wildly towards the empty space where Willow had stood. And indeed, the image of her broken form, her face contorted in a scream of pure agony, was seared into everyone's memory. Michael had forced the truth into the light, but the light had proven to be an inferno, and Willow was burning in it. From his position, Cyrus watched the two men argue over the pieces of the life he had just shattered. He smiled, a slow, satisfied smile. Chaos was his element. Division was his tool. And now, he had a new, unexpected pawn in his game, a daughter. A vulnerable, emotionally devastated daughter connected to some of the most powerful families in Port Charles. This was not a tragedy for him, it was an opportunity. The wedding may have been stopped, but for Cyrus Renaud, the real game had just begun. The guests, shell-shocked and murmuring, were finally herded away by a combination of Quartermain staff and police discretion. The beautiful garden was left empty, the chairs askew, the forgotten program fluttering in the breeze. The string quartet, who had been poised to play a joyous recessional, quietly packed their instruments, their music silenced. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Drew was left standing at the altar, alone, his future evaporated, grappling with a truth that redefined the woman he loved. Michael was left to wrestle with the consequences of his choice, wondering if his heroic act was, in fact, the greatest cruelty he had ever inflicted. Carly and Sonny were left to deal with the reemergence of Cyrus as a direct, personal threat to their family, now through the most intimate connection imaginable. And Willow was alone in a quiet room upstairs, tearing at the buttons of her wedding gown as if she could rip the contaminated skin from her body, sobbing for the mother she never knew, and mourning the death of the person she thought she was. The secret was out, but its work was only just beginning. It would ripple through every relationship, test every alliance, and force everyone in its wake to question the very nature of family, identity, and love. The wedding was over, but the storm had just made landfall. The chapel at the Metro Court was glowing with soft white light, the kind that made everything feel serene, warm, and hopeful. Willow stood in front of the mirror, smoothing her white satin gown, trying to settle her nerves while her hands slightly trembled. She whispered to herself, "It's okay, this is right, this is what we've chosen." Outside the small dressing room, the murmur of guests collecting in the aisle created a steady hum, but it was the silence in her own chest that made her pause, an odd ache she didn't want to name. Carly poked her head in gently. "Sweetheart," Carly said softly, "it's time." Willow turned and gave a small smile. "I'm ready. I think." Carly stepped in and adjusted her veil, her voice barely above a whisper. "You deserve happiness, Willow." Willow nodded, but something in Carly's eyes suggested she was forcing confidence she didn't quite feel. Drew stood at the altar in a crisp black suit, looking calmer than Willow felt. Curtis clapped him on the back with a grin. "You sure you're not gonna pass out?" Drew laughed quietly. "No, man. I'm good. I'm ready." But he scanned the entrance of the room again, and again. Curtis followed his gaze. "You think he's coming?" Drew sighed. "He said he'd be here." Curtis shrugged. "Michael's been through a lot. Give him space." Drew nodded, but tension clearly lingered in his jaw. Guests continued settling. Brooklyn teased Chase quietly across the aisle, Joss whispered something to Dex that made him grin, and Laura, sitting with Kevin, folded her hands politely. Everything seemed normal until the double doors creaked open again, and in walked Michael Corinthos with a look that froze Carly instantly. Willow stepped into the hallway with her bouquet clutched tight as she prepared to walk toward the open doors. She was smiling to herself, replaying the proposal, replaying all the moments that made this new chapter feel like healing instead of loss. But before she reached the entrance, she saw Michael standing there, in the middle of the aisle, his face pale and eyes wide with something more than nerves, something close to devastation. Willow blinked. "Michael?" she whispered. He turned toward her slowly, as if everything around him was underwater. "Willow, we need to talk." Carly stiffened at the front of the room. "Michael, not here. Not now." Michael didn't look at her. His eyes stayed locked on Willow with an apology forming before the words even came. Drew took a step forward. "Michael, what are you doing?" Michael swallowed hard. "I'm stopping this." Gasps rippled through the room. Chase stood up, instinctively ready to intervene if things escalated. Brooklyn placed a hand on his arm. Willow's voice was trembling. "Michael, why would you do this? What's going on?" Michael looked down, then back up, the weight of his next words nearly crushing him. "Because Drew's been lying to you. To all of us." Drew shot forward instantly. "That's not true," Michael cut him off. "It is. And I'm done keeping it quiet." Willow felt the room tilting slightly. "Michael, please, just tell me. He exhaled shakily, bracing himself. Drew knew the truth about Nina long before he ever told you. He knew she was talking to the SEC, and he hid it. He hid it because he knew what would happen if the truth came out. He kept it secret to protect himself. Not you. Carly closed her eyes. She whispered, Michael. The tension in Drew's face cracked. He stepped forward, reaching for Willow, then thinking better of it. Willow, listen to me. She backed away before his fingers could touch her. Is that true? You knew? You knew who turned us in? Drew hesitated only a fraction too long. That alone answered her. Willow's shoulders sank as if the air had been punched from her lungs. You promised me honesty, she whispered. Drew's expression contorted. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to feel betrayed again after everything with Nina. Michael shook his head. You didn't tell her because you didn't want to risk losing her. Willow's breath hitched. Is that true? Drew's voice lowered, pleading. I love you. I love you more than anything. I didn't tell you because I didn't want the truth to blow up everything we were rebuilding. Willow stared down at her bouquet as a tear slipped off her eyelashes. So you made that choice for me. Drew took a step closer. I did it for us. Michael spoke again, gently but firmly. No, Drew. You did it for you. Jocelyn rose to her feet, tension visible in her jaw as she glared at Drew. You let Willow think she was safe. You let her think she had all the truth while you were hiding the biggest piece of it. Dex tugged gently at her hand, urging her to stay calm. Carly approached Willow cautiously. Honey. I know this is a lot. I didn't know he kept it from you. I swear. Willow nodded absently, though her eyes were unfocused, as if she were drifting far from the room. She clutched her stomach, not from pain but from a wave of dizzying betrayal. Drew tried again, his voice almost cracking. I was trying to protect you from more pain. I was trying to protect our future. Willow looked up sharply. By lying to me? Drew's mouth opened, then closed. The truth was laid bare, and nothing he said now could pull it back. She stepped away from him, each step echoing through the silent chapel. The room had become a gallery of shocked, uncomfortable witnesses. Michael approached her carefully. Willow. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to be the one to break this open. But you deserved to know before you said vows based on something that wasn't true. Willow wiped her cheek. Why now? Why not before? Michael shook his head slowly. Because I thought Drew would come clean. I gave him the chance. More than once. Drew's jaw clenched. I told you I'd handle it. Michael fired back, and you didn't. You were going to let her marry you without telling her the truth. Drew's voice rose, losing its careful restraint. I love her. I've been there for her through everything she went through. Michael shot back, loving someone doesn't give you the right to hide the truth. Willow whispered, stop, both of you. Just stop. Silence fell. Drew softened instantly. Willow, please talk to me. She didn't look at him. I can't marry you today. I can't marry anyone today. Drew's breath faltered, and Curtis closed his eyes sympathetically. Willow walked slowly down the aisle, brushing past the guests, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Each step felt heavier, slower, as if she were walking through thick fog. Drew moved as though to go after her, but Carly grabbed his arm firmly. Let her go. Drew's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. Carly repeated sternly, let her go. Willow pushed through the chapel doors and stepped into the quiet hallway, pressing her back against the wall as fresh tears burned down her cheeks. Michael slipped out after her, but kept a respectful distance. I didn't want it to happen like that, he murmured. Willow kept her eyes closed. But it had to happen, right? Michael nodded slightly. You deserved the truth. Willow inhaled shakily. Thank you, even though it hurts. Michael stepped closer. I'm your brother. I'm always going to protect you. Even when the truth is the last thing anyone wants to hear. Willow gave a weak, broken laugh. Protecting someone and suffocating them with secrets, it feels like everyone keeps mixing the two up. Inside the chapel, Drew remained frozen at the altar. His hands were clenched, knuckles white, and Curtis whispered, Drew, just breathe, man. Drew struggled to keep his voice steady. I didn't lose her. Not yet. She just needs time. Curtis looked away. Maybe. But that wasn't the way to start a marriage. Drew stared at the empty aisle. I know. His voice cracked on the words, and for the first time, he looked genuinely lost. Outside, Willow sank onto a bench in the hallway. Michael sat beside her quietly. She leaned her head back and whispered, I thought I was finally in a place where the ground wasn't going to shift again. Michael whispered, I wish I could have kept it steady for you. Willow sighed. No, truth is messy. But lies are worse. The chapel doors opened again, and Carly stepped out carefully. Willow, if you need space, I understand. But I wanted you to know. I am so sorry. Willow nodded slowly. Thank you. Carly reached out to squeeze her shoulder. Whatever you choose next, we'll stand behind you. Drew lingered in the doorway behind Carly, looking broken. Willow, can I just say one thing? Willow lifted her chin, her eyes red but resolute. You can talk. I don't promise I can listen. Drew approached but kept a respectful distance. I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to take your choices away. I thought, if I gave you peace for a little longer, maybe it would be enough. Willow wiped her cheek again. Peace built on lies isn't peace, Drew.